Well, good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome to another session of First Light, and I am your perpetual host, Craig McKibben, and I don't think it's ever been hosted by anybody else, actually, now that I think of it. But after 185 episodes, actually, this is the 185th episode, we continue this. I was thinking about this just this morning, and I'll talk a little bit about some things that are happening. But the fact that we started this thing back in January of 21 during COVID, and so this has just continued on, and so here we are in January now of 25, and yes, we're in the right year. But anyways, as I always encourage people to do, say hi in the comment section, and that just really, just like Colin is doing. Thank you so much, Colin. I'm grabbing the first sip of coffee today, so let us know. Let us know in the comment section the type of coffee, or what do you drink? Do you drink tea? Do you drink coffee? Do you drink water? Let us know in the comment section. Just keep some conversation going there along. But so we've been doing this thing for 4 years now, and it's just been really, really cool to walk through this. I do want to be able to. My goal today is to try and get through this as quickly as possible, just because I want to be able to express some thoughts at the end of the session. For those of you who may not know, that a couple of days ago, back on Sunday, I advised the congregation that we would be leaving at the end of January. And so we are walking through that process right now. And it is interesting to hear some of the theories that are out there. And the truth is that you fill in the gaps where you will on that. But truthfully, just Carrie and I just felt it was the only thing that we could do. We want to see First Ave thrive. And so we wanted to be able to be a part of that process, and by doing that, recognizing our season in that, and allowing God to just lead the next season as we go through it. But anyways, so but I want to talk a bit about that at the end. I don't want to fixate on that because that affects this. That affects how this platform works, and so Carrie and I have been talking about, like, well, what do we do? Like, what's a good option for us going forward with this? Obviously, it won't be happening on this platform here on First Ave, but we'll see. We'll see what God has in store. If this is meeting a need, then we want to be able to meet that need. But we'll talk about that. Don't put it in the comment section, because that's the important thing. I'm going to hide anything that's in the comment section that anybody talks about with this. But there will be an opportunity for us to chat and stuff. And so, good morning, Colin and Lena and Miriam as well. Miriam, you are on. I love when you have a baby, because you don't have a cycle. There's no rhythm. The rhythm is baby. But anyways, glad that you're all joining us, and do say hi in the comment section like that. We love that. So let's take a moment. Let's pray. We got lots to talk about today, and I've never quite learned to write less. But let's pray. So God, I just ask that you would be with us today. Thank you for this day. Thank you. You've given us this opportunity for us to gather, whether it's now or for those that will be joining us later, and to not only hear your word, but to hear it in our hearts. And so, Lord, that's what I pray. I pray that this isn't just information, Lord. May this inspire us to draw ourselves closer to you. And we ask this, Jesus, in your name. Amen. All right, sweet. Okay, so, we're at chapter 7 now, so I don't really have to give a lot of reasoning for why Acts is written. You can watch and listen to those episodes on earlier ones there. But we are 20% through. So I keep a calculation. So we're a fifth of the way through Acts, and so let's get going. I'm going to start at verse 8, which was just the tail end of what we talked about last week, just to give some context. And then we're starting at verse 9 of chapter 7. Here we go. Okay, so it says this, that when he gave Abraham, he being God. So Stephen's preaching here. Stephen's sharing. They've chirped on him, saying, "Hey, you're against really the the whole, like, you've been blaspheming about God and all that. So we'll talk about that in a bit. So he says, when he, meaning God, gave Abraham the covenant of circumcision, after this, he fathered Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob became the father of the 12 patriarchs. Okay, let's go. Verse 9, here we go. The patriarchs became jealous of Joseph and sold him into Egypt, but God was with him and rescued him out of all his troubles. Okay, I just want to say this. I love the fact that Stephen, who is in trouble of sorts, says that God rescued Joseph out of his troubles. They weren't really his in the first place, right? There was stuff that happened to Joseph. It was stuff that happened to Joseph, not because of him, right? So this is the patriarchs, okay? It's his brothers, okay? The brothers sold him. Then, there's Potiphar's wife. Then there's, these things. The stuff that happened wasn't because of something he did. It was just against, like, it would happen to him. And I just want to say this. Though it's hard for us to recognize, Stephen is pointing out this, that sometimes God lets stuff grate on us for great things. That the things that, like, how come it's happening to me? But God has a bigger plan in this. God foresees what's going to happen through all of this stuff. Okay, and as I said, we mentioned that he mentions the patriarchs, which I think is very, how do I say this? Very polite, but at the same time, I think Stephen's like pointing out something, like who we esteem, Levi, Asher, Dan, Naphtali, like these tribes, they were jealous of Joseph. He was one of their brothers. They were jealous. Remember we talked about that in chapter 5, jealous, the zilus, that word that's there. The Sadducees were jealous of Peter and John. And the point there that I mentioned was that jealousy rose up. It gained momentum, okay? And that's what jealousy does do. That here we see that these brothers, time after time, were just getting more and more jealous, and it just started to close in their minds and close in their blinders of everything else. So I just wanted to say that sometimes we should avoid envy by enjoying instead. Like, enjoy what happens to somebody else instead of becoming envious, because that envious can really spark us to do some things that we shouldn't be doing, right? Also, I love the part that says that God was with him. God was with Joseph. Even though I wonder if Joseph, many times were like, God, where are you? We see that a lot with David. David's saying, like, God, where are you? Right? In these moments here. And I just wanted to say this, that even though Joseph here was innocent, but yet suffering, God was with him. God was with him. And we often see suffering as a punishment, but many times God uses these suffering moments for pruning or even preparing us for better. I think I've shared this before. It was some sort of, I'm not really a biologist person, and I already know I'm going to run out of time. But the idea that they were talking about seaweed and certain strands of seaweed, that the seaweed would be very weak in shallow water, but very weak in deep water, but very strong and resilient in shallow water. And the rationale behind it was because of the waves. As the waves would come over that seaweed, there's no waves down at the bottom of the ocean. So as soon as something would go by that seaweed, it'd fall over, right? So we don't understand that there's a resilience that comes from us having adversity and suffering and stuff. Okay, he keeps on talking. Stephen kept talking and says, he gave him favor, meaning God gave Joseph favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, who appointed him ruler over Egypt and over the whole household. Okay, so if you want to read that, it's the last 10 chapters of Genesis, right? You can read that part of the story here. Okay, now a famine and great suffering came over all of Egypt. So not just Joseph now, the suffering is over all of Egypt and Canaan, and our ancestors could find no food. Okay, so Can I just pause for a second here and try to remember last week? Okay. Why is Stephen speaking? Why is he saying all of this? I mentioned this kind of briefly at the beginning, that the reason is because, look in Acts 6, these freedmen, synagogueans, I'm working with it. They were stirring up this resistance, and they were stirring up lies about Stephen. In verse 11, it says that then they secretly persuaded some men to say, "We heard him speaking blasphemous words against Moses and God." Verse 13 says, also false witnesses who said, "This man never stops speaking against this holy place and the law." Okay. So Stephen's fighting fire with fire, basically, is what's happening. Stephen is fighting fire. What? This is about the law? This is about this holy? No. I'm going to go down on it. I'm going to talk about this thing, and I'm going to go right at it with what we're talking about, what you're talking about. So I just want to say that sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. You just say, nope, that's not true. And then you just kind of, facts are your friends. And so kind of that's what Stephen's doing here. Okay, verse 12 says this. When Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt, he sent our ancestors. I love that he said that. Our ancestors, the patriarchs, right? There the first time. The second time, Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, and Joseph's family became known to Pharaoh. Joseph invited his father, Jacob, and all his relatives, 75 people in all. And Jacob went down to Egypt. Okay, so he's going there. You read it. That's what happens. That ends up there's a famine, and so the brothers who had conspired against Jacob are now, or had conspired against Joseph, are now going to Joseph and asking for food, not knowing it's Joseph. And then there's a big reveal at the end, a reveal party of sorts, I guess. And then Jacob went down to Egypt. He and his ancestors died there. They died in Egypt. They were carried back to Shechem and were placed in the tomb that Abraham had bought for a sum of silver from the sons of Hamor in Shechem. Again, that's all at the end of Genesis. So let me give the non-preaching version of what Stephen's saying here, okay? So when Jacob heard Egypt had food, he sent his sons there, and his other son, Joseph, was in charge, okay? After revealing himself, he had the family move there. Okay, that's basically a summary of what was just said. But I do want to note this out here, that Stephen is showing how God uses the brothers' betrayal for good. Joseph didn't use it for good. God used the betrayal for good. And it ultimately, see, what happened is that they sold him because they were jealous of him, and he was a little cocky. I'll point that out. He's like, hey, I just got a dream that, you guys are all going to bow down to me, right? So that doesn't bode well. But still, that envy and that jealousy, you're only jealous and envious because you believe it. Jealous. The guy's like, okay, we're selling him because he's wackadoo. Like, he's just the mayor of Wackadoo Junction. No. Here we see that they believed it because there was a jealousy there. So what happens is that Joseph is saying, look, that this was for good. This was for good. God is saying this, right? And it ultimately placed Joseph in a position of power in all of Egypt, okay, after a long journey, but still. So consider this. This mirrors Jesus' testimony. What they don't know yet is that really what Stephen's trying to say is, you want to talk about the law, I'm going to talk about how we keep seeing Jesus, his story, his coming in the law. Here's an innocent man, rejected by others, jealous. Many times it talks about that because of the following around Jesus. Okay. And then ultimately, in this case, they thought Joseph was dead. Jesus was killed, right? So God's plan, okay, where Joseph was put in a position of power over Egypt, with Jesus, now God has put Jesus in a position of power over the entire earth. Like, there's this storyline that people don't know, that this is what Stephen's alluding to. He's getting to this point. Okay. Also, Despite other people's sin, meaning envy, okay, and this jealousy that took place, God used it for God's purpose. God's purpose, which is really cool because it shows that you guys just keep playing checkers all you want. I'm playing chess. Like, at the end of the day, God's plan, it's all going to work out, right? I just think that's really cool. Okay. And we've talked about that as to why, foreknowledge and that stuff. Okay. If not, ask me privately and just send me a message and then we can chat briefly about it. Okay. Verse 17. At the time he was, as the time was approaching to fulfill the promise that God had made to Abraham, the people flourished and multiplied in Egypt. You'd have to read why, but yes, okay. Until a different king, Pharaoh, who did not know Joseph, ruled over Egypt. Okay? So another reason why I believe we should not stop witnessing. Okay? Not stop witnessing. Recently in my devotions, I was reading over Judges chapter 2. I've made mention stuff about Judges in the past, but in Judges 2:10, there's this haunting verse, which will not, this haunting verse, you may hear it sometime. It says, after another generation rose up who did not know the Lord or the works he had done for Israel. Okay. The whole season of the Judges, they went into a spiral because another generation rose up and the generation before did not tell them about the Lord or the works that he had done in Israel. You read the story, I'm digressing. You read the story of the Exodus and all the wandering. And so after Numbers like 14, they're chirping. There's a lot of negativity. They could have gone into the promised land, but the negativity caused them to not go into the promised land. But then before they went into the promised land, there's this weird text about the fact that Joshua tells all of the leaders, hey, circumcise all of the males, because they didn't. During that whole time, they didn't circumcise anybody when they were born. They didn't follow the law because they didn't. And so it was like this reset moment that took place. So like, here's what's happening is that it's not new. It's not new, this idea. And for us, we need to be continuing to share God's word about this. So I'm just here to say this, that people will never know about Jesus, okay? Or sorry, people will never know Jesus if they don't know about Jesus. A simple thing to do would say, hey, put on your Facebook thing, this was a really great topic today, and share this on your timeline. That is a simple way just to kind of get it out there. Like I'm not doing that to puff myself up, put up other things. But if we don't talk about him, people won't know him. Okay. All right. So he, verse 19, Pharaoh, a new Pharaoh, dealt deceitfully with our race and oppressed our ancestors by making them abandon their infants outside so that they wouldn't survive. At this time, Moses was born, and he was a beautiful in God's sight. He was cared for in his father's home for 3 months. When he was put outside, Pharaoh's daughter, love the storyline, Pharaoh's daughter adopted and raised him as her own son. So Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in his speech and actions. There's a lot I want to say here. Did not have time to do it, but I just pray the Holy Spirit just spoke to you, maybe some of that stuff during there. But remember, again, we see this here. Stephen is kind of correlating how much the law actually points to Jesus. Moses' life or early life mirrored Jesus's early life. Again, okay? So Jesus was he left Bethlehem shortly after he was born to move to Egypt, right? Because Herod was going to kill any child under the age of 2. That's why found that out after he had gone to the wise men came to Jesus. And so there was a plot against Jesus. So they moved to Egypt here. So Herod was killing all these newborn Jewish boys, which I think is interesting that actually it goes to Egypt where Moses was, right? So Moses was to be Israel's deliverer from Egypt, but Jesus was taken aside so he wasn't killed, was to be our deliverer over all, not just Egypt, but evil, right? Evil, darkness, all of it. Okay. That's what we see as being beautiful here. Okay. Verse 23. Let's move on. When he was 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people. This is Moses again, right? 40 years old, he decided to visit his own people, the Israelites. When he saw one of them being mistreated, he came to his rescue and avenged the oppressed man by striking down the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptian. So this is early Exodus. So if you want to read where we are in the Bible, just to kind of get the backstory, we're at the beginning of Exodus. He assumed his people would understand that God would give them deliverance through him. But they did not understand. So he went to his own people and he started to stand up for his people. And he thought, my people are going to understand this. And they didn't. Who are we talking about? Moses? Jesus? Okay, keep going. All right. The next day, he showed up while they were fighting and tried to reconcile them peacefully, saying, men, you are brothers. Why are you mistreating each other? But the one who was mistreating his neighbor pushed Moses aside, saying, who appointed you ruler and a judge over us? Do you want to kill me the same way you killed the Egyptian yesterday? Okay. So he's outing Moses. So basically he's saying that he's not really thinking, hey, you're on our side at all. Okay. So when Moses heard this, Moses fled and became an exile in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. After 40, which I have to say, I find that interesting that we see, now that this is just free, but if you are reading Joshua and you're reading the story of how Joshua was like clearing out the areas, there's this rise up against Midian. And you'd kind of think, well, they may be a little more, what's the word? Favorable to Midian, because that's kind of where Moses was for such a long time. But no, it didn't matter. Okay. Anyways, that was just an aside. It says, when he heard this, Moses fled and became an exile in the land of Midian, where he became the father of 2 sons. After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to him in the wilderness of Mount Sinai in the flame of a burning bush. I wish I had time to talk about all of this, but I want to get that there's this concept that Stephen is getting at here. Okay. Something so insignificant, these weird circumstances, this bush. And it wasn't the fact that there was a burning bush. I've talked about this before, that it was the fact that the bush wasn't being consumed. Okay. That was what was weird about it. They're used to BC fires, I guess. But we see here that this small little detail, this weird thing, very insignificant, ends up being the launch of Moses' development. Moses, okay, let's back up. Joseph went into the wilderness to be shaped. He left his family, Potiphar's wife, into the jail, into Egypt to be shaped. Moses went into the wilderness to be shaped. Jesus also went into the wilderness, but to be tempted. He already was shaped, but to be tempted. And I think that even when you look at Joseph's life and you look at Moses' life, there was an opportunity for them to say, we're going to do our own thing, right? So here we see that Jesus, there's this storyline, this repeated pattern. Now, maybe you've known this, but like as you're reading this, Stephen's making a very, very strong point. You think that this is not about the law? Or you think that I'm against the law? This is the law being fulfilled, okay? And I just want to say this as somebody who, I've always liked to give like leadership lessons whenever I could. And so, in these last few episodes here on this platform, I just want to give you yet another leadership lesson. And that is, you need to understand, much like the seaweed, much of a person's character and much of a person's development happens in how they handle the wildernesses of their life. It's not when everything is going smooth that God that God develops you, it's in the storms. It's in the issues that come your way, and how am I going to handle this? I'm looking at some of your names here in this comment room, and I know your stories because you've shared them with me. Some of the adversity you've gone through, and how it shaped you, and how you now use it as part of your testimony. These tests become these triumphs, and they become part of your testimony. Okay, let's keep going. So I have a couple more minutes to say some stuff. Verse 31 says this: when Moses saw it, meaning the burning bush, he was amazed at the sight. As he was approaching to look at it, the voice of the Lord came. I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. Which I have to say this. It would have been fine to say I'm the God of Abraham because all those other ones came from him. I love that he was the God of Abraham. He was the God of Isaac. He was the God of Jacob. He's the God of Colin. He's the God of Charlene. He's the God of Craig. He's with us right now. Okay. Moses began to tremble, which I probably would do worse than tremble, but whatever, and did not dare to look. The Lord said to him, take off the sandals from your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy ground. I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their groaning and have come down to set them free. Again, this is what Stephen's getting at. And now, come, I will send you to Egypt. I just want to say this. I love this. I love this. Take off your shoes, or take off your sandals, because you're standing on holy ground. And I want to point this out. Can I do it quickly? Probably not, but we'll see. Yes, God meets us where we are at, okay? But God does not diminish himself there. God does not diminish himself for us. He doesn't water himself down. He doesn't say, okay, well, seeing is like, let's go down to the lowest common denominator. No, he says, take off your sandals, because where you are is holy, okay? Let me say this to you, that when God comes into your life, when God comes into these circumstances, he is calling you to greater in his presence. He is calling you to rise up. He's not calling you to settle. He's not calling you to say, you know what? Well, you're wearing your sandals. Okay, things will be fine. No, you need to recognize you're in the presence of God. Now you need to step up, literally. Step up. And that would be a good message title on that. But or step off, I guess would be a way, and get off those sandals. Recognize that God is holy. And so when we come to God, he's calling us to be greater. Every one of you are on this, I believe right now, not because you're bored, but because you want to better yourselves. You want to be a better person. That's what God is calling us to each and every day, to move closer to who he desires us to be. Okay. Here we go. Backstretch. This Moses, whom they rejected when they said, who appointed you a ruler and a judge? That's interesting, because it's going to happen. The one God sent as a ruler and a deliverer through the angel who appeared to him in the bush. This man led them out and performed wonders and signs. I can't make this stuff up, guys. Okay. In the land of Egypt, at the Red Sea, and in the wilderness for 40 years. Okay. All I want to say here, as we kind of wrap this up, verse 35, it says, ruler and a judge. Okay, the book of Judges can be translated the book of deliverers. I just read Judges recently, and it's a deliverer after deliverer after deliverer after deliverer, right? So it's here. It's what's commonly called in theological circles, a type of Christ. It's not a type in the sense of like one variation of it, but it's a foreshadowing of it. Okay, so there's an archetype, which is like the opposite, but then there's the type. Okay, so it's basically, it is a facsimile of something that's going to be in the future kind of idea. That's kind of what it's getting at. So we see here that he's a deliverer. Moses was a deliverer. Jesus was a deliverer. Okay. Lastly, I just want to say this, that God is faithful even when we are repeatedly not. God is faithful. His plan is faithful. Even when we butcher things and whatever, he is faithful. Okay, so some lasting thoughts before I share just some last kind of administrative, I don't even know what to call it, just housekeeping stuff or house leaving. I don't know. Last thoughts. First thing, we need to trust God's timing, not ours. Trust God's timing. Secondly, God is there in the suffering. Okay. It reminds me of a movie where a guy goes up, their plane is canceled because of fog that comes in. And the ticket salesman person says, listen, I don't make the fog. I just deal with it. I don't make the fog. We just deal with it. So here, God is there in the suffering. Thirdly, God knows intimately what rejection is like. If you feel like you've experienced rejection from others, from someone that mattered to you, God knows what that's like. Jesus knows intimately what that is like as well. And four, that Jesus, as we see from what Stephen's kind of laying out here, is our current and our forever deliverer. He is our deliverer through all of life. Okay. Anyways, next week, I'll say this in closing, as I shared at the beginning, on Sunday, Carrie and I, this may go a couple of minutes. Carrie and I, made the decision right before Christmas that we were going to, exit and step aside from our leadership role here at First Ave at the end of January. So Sunday, January 26th will be my last day, handing the keys, and that will be it. It breaks our hearts. It's not something that we even foresaw. And so once that message is up, you'll want to watch that, because the message of the skip the verses, I explain the rationale, what led up to that. And do me a favor. I've already heard some interesting storylines. Just avoid that. Just contact me, talk to the board. Really, it was just, we felt it. The board agreed with us that it made sense. And so that's what we're doing. We're just being obedient to that. And we don't know what's next. But we're just trusting God, and we're okay with that. We really are okay in trusting God, in our own little wilderness that we're going through. This affects this platform. In 3 weeks, this is going to end on, so the Thursday prior to the 26th will be the last one that will be on this platform. I don't know. I enjoy doing it. I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Don't put in the comment section, what you think we should do. You have the ability through this, to send me a direct message through Facebook, email me at craig@firstav.org. Or if you can text me, whatever, if you know my number. Tell me what you think we should do. Should I just do it on my own platform on Facebook and just do it? Do we pilot it and see if it works? I don't want to do it just because we're going to do it. I want to do it because it's effective. Really, that's what it comes down to. I want it to be effective. So let me know privately. If anything's in the comment section, I will erase it, just because I don't want that to sway anything. So just don't do that in the comment section. But feel free to reach out to me, and feel free to, I'd love to see you guys in the next 3 weeks that will be in church, 12th, 19th, 26th. As we continue this series called Skip the Verses, about that. So that's fine. You know what? This thing's been moving all day. All right. So anyways, next week just want to let you know, we continue on. Stephen's not done his message yet. And so we're going to look at when a martyr, meaning a witness, becomes a murder. Okay. So when a martyr becomes a murder. But always, I love to leave you with some little tidbit of wisdom and thoughts. So I just thought I'd kind of close out this today by saying, why did the man fall in the well? Because he couldn't see that well. Till next time, God bless you guys. Go in peace.